I believe entrepreneurship should probably be thought of as a lifelong career path. Most of them will probably not work, but it's a career where the joy in the journey is what matters the most. Then you can have a computer do some work for you. That I find fascinating. Who the hell even suggested that programmers and makers had the best ideas? Like, that can't be true. We might just be entering a period for where the question is more valuable than the answer.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Devico Breakfast Bar. Here we speak with different people involved in the business landscape, share their expertise, delve into the latest tech trends, and explore the ins and outs of IT outsourcing. I'm Oleg Sadikov, and today I'm excited to have Dennis Mortensen, the CEO and founder of LaunchBrightly. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. Hi Dennis.
Good to be here.
Thanks for joining me today. Could you start by telling us about yourself and your professional background?
Ooh, yes. I could turn that into a 4-hour seminar, but then of course it would be better if you called my mom. The short story though is that I spent the last coming up 27 some odd years working on 5 prior ventures and am now working on the 6th venture, having spent about 5 years on each. And I'm equally excited to whatever we're going to get the band back together. So that's my life in short. We've been very fortunate, lucky probably, to have a few exits along the way. So we have full opinions about what the beginning looks like, what the middle looks like, and what the end looks like, both in positive and negative settings.
What initially sparked your interest in entrepreneurship, and how did you decide to pursue it as a career path?
It's a good question. Perhaps just a quick side note, and I'm surely biased here because I'm so pro entrepreneur that I'll try to convince anybody to at least add it to their bucket list. So at some point in their life, they'll go about doing at least one venture. Now, the way I would like people to think about it, and I will tell you exactly how I ended up here, but the way I would like them to think about it is not in the kind of traditional Silicon Valley sense for where you spot something and then you figure out you must do it at all cost and it's a single mission that you're on. I believe entrepreneurship should probably be thought of as a lifelong career path, not a single mission to go conquer some territory, but one for where if investors, professional investors, invest in a portfolio, which they can do in parallel because they have for years to spend n number of millions of dollars. They expect most of them to not work, a few of them to be winners. You can't do that as an entrepreneur. So you probably need to do it in serial, which means you can probably do 8 to 10 ventures over a lifetime. So really what you're running is the 50-year fund, as in Oleg and Dennis are on a 50-year mission for where we'll do a handful plus more ventures over that time. Most of them will probably not work, but it's a career where the joy in the journey is what matters the most. Now, that was my little kind of advert for entrepreneurship. How did I get started? I actually had opposite fantasies, which is that I just wanted to kind of get my CS degree and go work for IBM. As in, that's what I wanted. That's kind of what I kind of leaned into. I'm from a setting where family, fathers, uncles, cousins are all entrepreneurs, not in tech, but different settings. So there's certainly a nature versus nurture type debate to have had here. But in college, I did game development for kind of beer money and what have you. Back in the day when you would do motion graphics in assembly at a very different pace to how we can engineer today. And the company I worked for kind of went belly up, and I ended up acquiring the assets of that company, and that became the foundation for my first venture. Not by design. I kind of stumbled into the whole thing, and that was just the beginning. I got hooked, and here we are, 7 years later. I wish I could tell you it was all part of a big plan since I was 10 years old. It was really just me being a little angry of having worked on a game title for years on end, them going bankrupt, me not knowing what to do, buying the assets. I now have a company. We ended up selling the title. I made a few monies, and then you're kind of off to the races.
Thanks for the detailed answer. What do you find most fulfilling about being an entrepreneur, and what keeps you motivated in the face of challenges?
I've certainly seen plenty of first time entrepreneurs for where the perceived joy or the spoken about joy is the destination. As in, once I become rich, or once we get acquired, or once something happens, then I'll be happy or joyful. I'm not so sure that is the right way to go about it. You need to find some pleasure, if not all of it, in the journey itself. So I tend not to think about too much, at least, what the destination might look like in that regard. If you make some good product, make some customers happy, good things will come out of that. Sometimes majestic outcomes, sometimes not so much, but it's really the journey itself. So to kind of answer your question on that, I like, as a maker, the joy of spotting some true pain in the universe, as in some user in your particular vertical not being able to do some job fast enough, cost effective enough, or at all, and kind of going from 0 to 1 and saying, I think we can apply software here. And that kind of whole process is super creative and bordering on artsy, right? For where you work the whiteboard, you work your Figma, you work your 15 other kind of little tools, and at some point you'll put some PR to production, and ta-da, we now have a piece of software. That joy, and just repeating it over and over again, for me, that is living the good life. As saying, that, a Diet Coke, a good laptop, and I'm happy.
How do you see AI and data continuing to shape the future of automation, particularly within the realm of SaaS products?
It's a good question. And asking anybody to make any predictions for the future, the guest is somewhat bound to make a mistake. As if I knew exactly what the future would look like, there'll be many other things I should do with that knowledge. So I obviously don't. What it seems like is that the vector that we're on might be accelerating. So go back, it's not that I'm that old, but I took my CS degree on the command line, as in the primary UI paradigm, or really the only way to get access to compute was through a set of command line actions. That was it. And you needed experts, really mostly computer scientists. Then at some point, we got the graphical user interface. We could slowly start to kind of democratize it. My mom could start to kind of write documents. And then a little bit later, which might be a distinct UI paradigm of its own right, we had the touch interface. You can start to kind of fool around on these devices. And now it seems like we might finally, not entirely, but almost fully democratize access to compute. For where if you can speak a sentence, not just in English, but in any language, even my funny Danish English, then you can have a computer do some work for you. That I find fascinating, because it used to be that not the people with the best ideas were able to kind of craft something. It was just those who had the expertise to kind of pull something out of that kind of compute setting were allowed to. But now, normal people, and just by raw distribution, one would suggest that many of those who couldn't make it might now be able to make things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to make. And that kind of makes me excited, like really excited. And you can even start to kind of see this for where, I'll just pick one out of 1,000 things, right? You have a new type of, I'm not even sure I would call them programmers, but you can actually, extract enough from a ChatGPT type session for where you can get some code up and running, a little kind of program. You and me want to implement Tetris, as in that used to be kind of a summer-long endeavor for where first task is to learn whatever your favorite language might be. And once you figure that out, there's a whole kind of conceptual set of logics you need to kind of pick up where if you don't have a kind of CS degree, where are you going to pick that up from? So that's the first kind of 3 months of the summer. Then the last 2 weeks, we might do our Tetris project. Now, hey, you and me have a new bend on Tetris? Yeah, we're just going to go in, have it kind of spit out some code. We might not understand all of it. We can probably make an MVP. It's going to get us started. On a low level, that really excites me. There's all sorts of other dots on that map that are equally, if not more exciting. But that particular one, I like to kind of emphasize for where there's a bunch of newcomers coming into the space who might have better ideas. As in, who the hell even suggested that programmers and makers had the best ideas? Like, that can't be true. So that's going to be exciting to see.
Have you watched the film Tetris?
Of course, I played it at university for money. So I'm a huge fan. It's probably the only game I really fell in love with. And I don't know how many versions of that I've implemented over and over again, starting at 11, writing it in assembly to kind of whatever 2 years ago, you write some sort of JS version with some nice kind of canvas pixels. Like, I love that game. Love the whole setting. I even owned the domain for a while. Funny kind of side story. Got sued for it. I didn't own the trademark. I was just very early out, bought the domain, and I had to surrender it.
What was the domain name?
Tetris.
.com?
And .dk and a whole host of other ones, just because I liked it. So I bought the whole swath of domains. So I should have kept a ton of those domains. Back when it was reasonably expensive, there was only one domain register, for example, for .com. You probably remember this, right? For where you can only register .com domains in one place. That is obviously semi-democratized now. So I bought a whole swath of domains, but they were very expensive. I think we paid $50 or $60 a year per domain. But that's not much.
When was it?
Early 90s.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Oh yeah. So, but then again, it's not the $60, but it's just if you own many, many, many thousands, any number which you multiply by many, many, many thousands becomes an even larger number. And in the end, I had to kind of surrender most of them. But I should have. Do you know what? I still wake up some nights thinking, damn, I had some good domains. And there's still something lovable, I'm sure you would agree, for anybody about good domains. So my last venture, so this venture is called LaunchBrightly. We have the .com. It's a little bit of a longer kind of phrase. We owned x.ai, a single letter domain. That's just sexy, right? We got acquired a couple of years ago. Of course, I had to surrender the domain along with the company. But yes, I have an affinity for good domain names, like everybody else.
In your opinion, what are some common misconceptions people have about the capabilities and limitations of AI in streamlining business processes?
I'm not so sure normal people, and even some extension of normal people, can fully appreciate that AI is not magic. It's a set of predictions based on a data set which you probably assembled yourself as an organization. So it's not magic you pull out of thin air. It is you over a very long period of time having assembled a unique and proprietary data set that you might have annotated or in some sense have turned from unstructured into a structured setting. And that is really where you go win. I think too many have kind of, at least initially, latched on to generic models. Say you open some session somewhere on some model, ask a few questions or ask it to kind of make a few predictions. And it's all kind of very nice and sexy. But I think to win, you have to assemble something on top of your own operated, assembled, and annotated data set. That's how you win. And I'm not sure everybody is attached to that, to me, fact just yet.
Talent scarcity is a pressing issue for many companies, especially those seeking to implement advanced technologies like AI and automation. In your experience, how has talent scarcity influenced the decision-making process when it comes to leveraging external resources such as IT outsourcing?
Outsourcing, whether there's kind of scarcity in market or not, perhaps at this very moment, May of 2024, where over the last year, 2 years, we've seen for the first time is many of the kind of tier one companies lay off in the tens of thousands. So good engineers coming out of Amazon or Google or Meta or what have you, they used not to be the fact. They just used to be magnets before that moment in time. So today it's a little different, but independent of where we are in that particular cycle, I don't think there's anything intrinsically good or bad about outsourcing. It's really just always other people doing something which you cannot do yourself. Some of those people you might have on, what's called in the US W-2 payroll and health insurance and what have you, and they sit right next to you. And some other people might be across the street, are paid as contractors. Some might come as a whole nameless team from some other nation. I think they're all kind of equally good if applied for the proper setting. So in our last setting, for example, we had a dramatic need for very specific annotation. We initially did the annotation internally because we needed to kind of figure out the annotation guidelines for that particular data set. Once we figured out the guidelines and the annotation guides, we hired a set of contractors locally so we could see whether we had the processes in place to kind of scale it. We succeeded in that. And then as a third step, we outsourced the whole thing and had 100 people in the Philippines doing some work with great success. And each of the settings were not better or worse. They were just different moments where we had different needs and applied, I think, the right methodology. Where I do see some people, again, sometimes first-time entrepreneurs and sometimes non-makers, will perhaps be too quick to outsource something for where you're supposed to be the expert. I'm a little bit skeptical of outsourcing something for where you, the organization, is supposed to be an expert. As in, you can't outsource success. You can outsource many things, but the kind of success with which the organization is supposed to be built on can't be one of them. And that's sometimes a little hard perhaps to determine, but I do think there's some black and white settings to that where this we can never outsource. This we can very easily outsource. Then there's this kind of little gray area of where, well, you need, again, as the organization, to be the expert to determine that. But I would be vigilant in trying to figure out what is it that we're supposed to win on. We might die, we might lose, we might kind of see many things happen before we're going to get to the goal. But what is it I've told the world that we're good at? And that particular thing, we must do ourselves intimately, in-house.
What do you think are some potential risks or challenges associated with IT outsourcing in the context of AI and automation? And how can companies mitigate on these risks effectively?
1,000 things, right? But we can pick a semi-generic string here, which is that it's always been difficult, even internally, to go from having some product manager in some capacity describe the particular feature in question and have that so well communicated and so well planned out that what was on paper is what ends up in the application. That sounds easy. It is not. It's extremely difficult, even internally, even with two people who are colors buddies and who work together for 6 years. Even the next feature will have some stumbles, right? So that has always been difficult. It's even more difficult when you outsource it to people for where there might even be cultural differences, for where, how does that come into play with tech? Well, it does, and we can talk about that as well. So there's certainly some difficulties there, where I think that might expand if you think in the theme of AI, is that AI allows us to be more loose in our definitions, as in the inputs and outputs are not kind of defined many times as we communicate in the way we would do it, as in, hey, here's this particular API, here's the kind of request parameters, here's the kind of response kind of JSON. The whole thing's kind of very well planned out, where I've seen some people kind of loosen up on those requirements because, well, it's AI, it's under the kind of magic umbrella, and then you become less focused on kind of the inputs and the outputs in the kind of more traditional software sense. That, I think, is a danger. You should be equally kind of vigilant, even if you apply a set of predictions for, well, what does my model take in? what are the dangers of what it takes in? What can it predict? How do I kind of measure that success? What is the precision or recall, whatever you kind of want to measure that in? And as in be equally kind of vigilant. I've seen some people just loosen up a little bit because perhaps the input is natural language, as we've seen, right? What used to be very structured can now just be natural language. That's a scary setting for you. You might not be fully in control with what goes in and might be in even less control of what comes out. Say you might not even own those foundational models, that you use some sort of open AI, API. Well, now you don't even really own the output. So those are scary settings. Sorry, I might just ramble here, but those are my 2 cents.
Dennis, as we are finishing, could you please share your insights on the technological advancements that currently spark your enthusiasm?
There used to be, and probably still is, a time for where most workers, tech or not, would be rewarded for the answer. Say you and me run some retail store online and we want to figure out whether the latest kind of ad campaign we ran on Google for the West Coast had a good enough conversion that could justify the price per click. Some standard PPC marketing question, right? Then we'll kind of give it to our analysts. Oleg and Dennis have spent 100 grand. We want to figure out, do we make more than 100 grand, or do we make less, but the LTV might kind of justify it? We want to make back the money in 8 months. Like, analyst, go do your thing. They'll jump into whatever kind of application they use. Say they use Google Analytics or perhaps some other more mature kind of BI solution. Go work for half a day, come back to you and me with a report, and they will be rewarded for that particular answer. As in, hey, they did all the right kind of segmentations, all the right filters, did a little bit of kind of a regression analysis to kind of see what it might look like, kind of contrasted against the kind of LTV, like did the thing that the analyst is supposed to do. Nice. Thank you very much. Good analyst. Now, we might just live in a future for where getting the answer is not the most costly affair. As in, you can actually just ask that question. Hey, for the last 3 weeks, and that 100 grand we spent on Google on the West Coast in that particular segment, what is the expected return on that if we kind of compare it to our LTV? What is the payback period? Like some standard question. You and me are just kind of like mulling it over in some meeting. And the answer will come instantly, or very quick, or almost kind of at no cost. Well, if that is the case, then we're not rewarding the answer. Then we're rewarding the question. And I think we might just be entering a period for where the question is more valuable than the answer. That is interesting. That's a different way of living in the future for where that grunt work, that usual set of things we would be rewarded for in our jobs, that's not it. Now we have to come up with good questions. That kind of excites me. As in, well, and those questions, they can come from anywhere. Anybody can ask any question. Shit, they can ask 15 questions, discard 14 of them and say, yeah, those are, given the answer, those are silly questions. This one, though, yielded some insights that I hadn't even thought about. That was the right question. I can now spread the gospel of that particular answer. So that is a perhaps elusive, but kind of interesting kind of take on the future that might be ahead of us.
Dennis, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining me today. It was a very deep and philosophical interview, I would say. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, and it was great.
Thank you very much for having me. And in closing, if anybody want to have a chat with me on the internet, I'm everywhere on @Dennis Mortensen. And if they're excited about product screenshots, go to LaunchBrightly.com. I had to say it. Forever the entrepreneur.
If you enjoy our discussion and want to stay updated on future episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you will not miss new latest insights and conversations from the Devico Breakfast Bar. See you in a week.